It for many years. In 1964, a gentleman by the name of Mark Fredrickson and myself purchased the business from my dad. My uncle had passed away years before. And this area really was known with the proximity of Harrison Community Club right here. The merchants here were really known as Harrison merchants. And they included a variety store, Crane Variety, a grocery store, Johnson Grocery, Ed's Bakery, Eisenach Plumbing and Heating, and also Guerin Meat Market. Those were businesses all within this block right here. I came here in 1963, and at that time this was predominantly a Polish neighborhood. And when I first came here, I thought I will never learn to spell all these names, which I became very proficient at as the years passed. They were absolutely wonderful people. Many of them, the reason they lived here is because they worked close by in a variety of businesses and manufacturing facilities.
Yeah, we've been around since 1946. My parents started it at our location here, as this was a real, not only just a bakery, but it was a neighborhood shopping center with the bakery, the meat markets, and the dry goods store, all right here for people to come down. But bakeries, as a general, were very prevalent, from what I can remember my parents telling me that there were probably 4 or 5 bakeries that were probably within a 6 blocks radius of where we are right now. We had, plus we also not only had that, is that then later on in we had the major bread plants like the Zinsmaster Baking and stuff like that was in the area, besides the little neighborhood bakeries too. So, and then the Tasty plant later on also.
Well, the businesses that were here, Johnson Grocery, Ed's Bakery, and so forth, many times I think people today probably thought that they were just little shops without a great deal of business, but that's far from the truth. They were bustling little businesses. The lines on Saturday morning used to just form in the grocery store and also inside Ed's Bakery. It was rather phenomenal to see.
As far as bakery in the West End area it was probably a lot of big aromas going through the whole hillside around the area.
Eating establishments, including Bridgman's, were in the neighborhood.
A coffee shop called Lundall's Coffee Shop, which was at 21st Avenue West and 1st Street. They made egg coffee, big pots of egg coffee. And on a busy day, they would serve up to 600 cups of coffee in that little restaurant.
Hansen Hardware, opened by Anton Hansen from Norway, beauty parlors, and clothing stores, including Mortrud and Koneski and J.C. Penney's, were places for West Enders to pick up all the latest items and satisfy needs or wants. Undertakers, bankers, and insurance agents were available right in the West End. West End residents could walk, shop, and access services within blocks from their doors.
They were all over. Every corner had a grocery store. There were the West End, which is now Lincoln Park, had stores. I mean, it was a self-sufficient area. Just, name it, and it was there.
In its early days, Duluth had newspapers published in English and several in other languages, ranging from Finnish to Swedish to German. The West End produced several newspapers of its own. You could pick up the Daily Commercial Record in the late 1800s, and in 1893, the Duluth Press by Buffalo Bill Cody's sister, Helen, and her husband, Mr. Hugh Wetmore. Buffalo Bill visited the Xena City in January of 1894. 1,800 guests assembled in the Duluth Press building to do honor to the world-famed Buffalo Bill. Another newspaper, this one by George Jensen, was called the Weekly Advertiser and later named the Duluth Free Press. Beginning in 1904 and for over 40 years, it carried news, ads, and the community announcements. People coming to Duluth for a visit or to work needed a place to stay. An emigrant house on Rice's Point opened in 1869. More boarding houses and hotels quickly arose to accommodate the influx of people. Several were established in the West End. The Esmond Hotel opened on April 10, 1893 at the corner of 20th Avenue West and Michigan Street, giving lodging to sawmill and railroad workers. In 1913, the Rex Hotel was built at 2001 West Superior Street. From 1930 to 1942, it was the Curtis Hotel. The lobby had a tourist information bureau. An average of 100 people per day registered from June 1st to early August of 1940. Further west on Superior Street was the Western Hotel. The West End had its own library since around 1893. It had been set up in the neighborhood house on West Superior Street, then at the J.J. Moe department store. On September 1, 1917, the Lincoln Branch Library at 2227 2nd Street opened with support from Andrew Carnegie. Local architects Holstead and Sullivan designed the Tudor Revival-style building. The West End had its own fire station. Medical needs of early residents could be taken care of at St. Mary's Hospital, built at 20th Avenue West and 3rd Street. It was staffed with nurses from a convent that Mother Scholastica Kirst established. Admissions at the hospital were registered by nationality. In 1892, the first appendectomy in Minnesota took place at St. Mary's during a meeting of the Minnesota State Medical Association. After 10 years as a hospital, the same building became St. James Orphanage for the next 10 years, still being operated by the sisters. It had a capacity for over 100 youth. With deaths of parents due to dangerous work or early deaths due to disease or wartime service, the orphanage played a well-needed role. After 1910, the building became St. Anne's Home for the Aged, again operated by the sisters. It existed for over 45 years at that location. The 1918 influenza epidemic caused the closing of schools and churches and a ban on all gatherings. Victims of the tragic fires of 1894 and October 1918 were treated and supported in St. Mary's Hospital.
And I remember people walking down the streets with animals in big baskets. They didn't want to give them up, but some of them were burnt, and many cows were coming in down from the hills. And people with all their ownings came to town because the ones that could get away from the fire, you know. So that was a hard time for many people.
Several West End organizations and churches, including Bethany and the Swedish Tabernacle, opened their doors as a shelter for the homeless and/or became a distribution center for clothing for the fire victims. In the 1880s, the Duluth Street Railway Company expanded their routes past the Point of Rocks. In 1892, meeting the growth of the population in the West End and western parts of Duluth, a brand new streetcar barn, designed by Traphagen and Fitzpatrick, was constructed on Superior Street, west of 26th Avenue West. In the 1880s, the trolleys were pulled by horses or mules, and later replaced with electric lines and then buses. The streetcar barns, with their capacity for 20,000 people, have been the site of several large-scale events for the Zenith City. Enger Tower is named in honor of the Norwegian immigrant Bernt Enger, who ran Enger and Olsen Furniture. He donated 2/3 of his estate, enabling the city of Duluth to acquire and develop a park and a golf course for the enjoyment of future generations. Lincoln Park in the West End was one of Duluth's first parks. Miller Creek cascaded down its center. Rogers Boulevard, later called Skyline Parkway, crossed through the park. It's been a place for having a good time outdoors year-round.
There were so many picnics in the summertime. The biggest was the Swedish picnic, the Midsummer Festival they called it. They had a king and a queen and program, music, dancing, booths that sold everything, and it was just fun, and everybody waited for it. There was also a Finnish picnic. Churches sometimes had their services in the park and a picnic following it, and that went on for many, many years, and that was just the highlight of the summer.
The festival was held annually for over 50 years in Lincoln Park. These midsummer celebrations modeled those held for hundreds of years in Sweden to mark the beginning of the summer season. Norwegians of Duluth also had a grand celebration in Lincoln Park. Organizations and community clubs were abundant in Duluth and in the West End. Besides meeting at churches and schools, the community gathered at local halls, such as the popular Woodman Hall, for events ranging from dances to political candidate speeches, athletic matches, and card parties. Several groups had cultural connections. Indoor and outdoor recreation were good times at the Harrison Community Club.
How we used to come skating over at Harrison. And when we did come up, we used to have to sit on the banks to wait our turn to get out on the ice. That's how many kids were there skating.
The West End Star Theater opened in 1908 and existed for 42 years. In the darkened movie houses, the children of diverse immigrant groups saw the same films in the same language, English, and acquired common heroes and common culture. Winter frolic festivals or summer carnivals were also a part of the vibrant community activity. In Duluth's early years, the circus would come to town and paraded through the West End. Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey's, and other circus groups, each claiming to be the biggest, the best ever, would arrive to Duluth by train. Some parades and shows reportedly had upwards of 400 acrobats, gymnasts, and riders, plus 50 clowns and hundreds of wild animals.
And the camels were right on the street. We could get pretty close to them. But I remember we sat on a hill and watched everything go by.
Multiple bands, a steam calliope, and the wild animals created lively and interesting sounds, while crowds of people had their eyes glued to the exotic scenes. The young and old and everyone in between had something fun to do in the West End.
Like I said, it was a good town to live in. I enjoyed living down there.
You did a lot of things right here in your own neighborhood.
Early settlers flocked to Duluth and its West End from other parts of the nation and other parts of the world. Through booms and busts over the years, people worked hard and found ways to enjoy themselves too. They brought forward religious devotions, entrepreneurial dreams, and future generations. An interstate highway, parking lots, new businesses, and larger buildings like Duluth's main post office and the Duluth Transit Authority building have now replaced some of the earlier homes and businesses. Another change has been the neighborhood's name.
Officially, the City Council adopted the name change about 1 year later from the time that the mayor and the business district got together in October of '95, and it officially became the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Soon we found that organizations in the neighborhood adopted the name. And when you look at the history, the West End was just that, the West End of the city of Duluth up until 1894. And then in 1894, the city annexed the village of West Duluth. And no longer was it the West End. So really we've had a misnomer of this neighborhood since 1894, which added to the confusion. There's a lot more west of the city of Duluth than just the West End neighborhood.
The ethnic pockets of the West End do not exist as they once did. People became Americans and became Duluthians. They've experienced common changes over the decades.
We enjoyed living here.
It was a good neighborhood.
Quite an amazing story.
Lincoln Park, formerly known as the West End, strides forward with new and continuing business ventures, a beautiful park, and a sparkle of deep community spirit.
Norge, mitt Norge, så sover du tyst I vinteren skinnende sale. Ingen kan drømme så lett og så lyst når elvene synker I dvale. Og ingen kan smile så stille og glad når meisernes fløytende stemme dør av og skogen sover I dale. Norge, mitt Norge, så gi meg din vår, sol over vugende vannet. Men hør meg, ja, hør meg når dagen forgår, og aftenen skygger din panne. Så lær meg å visne om Norge, min mor, og rei meg en seng I din hellige jord, når så